I know how cliché this is going to sound, but I swear I'm not the paranoid type. I've never snooped through my wife's phone, never stalked her socials, never grilled her over which coworkers were at the bar after work. I wasn't built that way, or at least I didn't think I was, until one Tuesday morning turned me into someone I barely recognized. It started with an email, just a stupid, auto-generated Gmail notification from our shared family account. Kelly and I set it up years ago, mainly for flight confirmations, calendar invites, our dog's vet appointments. I hadn't checked it in months. But that day, I was looking for an old boarding pass, and there it was. A confirmation from the Edison Hotel in Soho room 704. Booked at 1:36 a.m. Checked in at 2:08 a.m. and billed to our joint card. That alone would have been enough to make my stomach drop, but what followed was even worse. An Uber receipt, on her card, timestamped 2:23 a.m. Pick up, her office in Midtown. Drop off, the Edison Hotel. I must have read it 6 or 7 times, like repetition would somehow make it make more sense. I tried rationalizing. Maybe her team pulled an all-nighter and got a few rooms. Maybe the office HVAC broke, and this was some emergency solution. It was a stretch, but in those first few minutes I wanted it to be a stretch. I needed it to be anything but what it looked like. I didn't bring it up right away. I closed the tabs, shut the laptop, and just sat there on the couch, staring at nothing. She came out of the bedroom around 7:40, hair wet from the shower, already wearing heels and tapping through Slack notifications on her phone like nothing had happened. I watched her pour coffee like she did every morning, humming some indie playlist under her breath. I studied her, really studied her. Her face looked tired, but it always did before big client launches. Her voice was calm, normal, no nerves, no weird pauses. She was good, too good. Did you get any sleep last night? I asked. Barely, she said, rubbing her eyes. Client review at 10, and we're still waiting on final comps from the contractor in Long Island. She wasn't even lying yet. Not technically. That's what made it worse. I waited until she left for work. Then I opened her laptop. I know, I hate who I became in that moment. But this itch had started and I couldn't ignore it. I wasn't even looking for anything specific. I just wanted context. Maybe a PDF of some deliverable. Maybe a calendar invite that could explain the hotel. Instead, I found a live photo in her iMessage gallery. It wasn't labeled. It wasn't even recent. But as I held my thumb on the screen, it sprang to life. It was blurry and chaotic, like someone had taken it mid-laugh. But there it was, a man's hand on her waist, not just resting, holding, pulling her in like they were trying not to be seen. Her face was out of frame, but I recognized her laugh. I could hear it in those 3 seconds, familiar and distant at the same time. I closed the phone and placed it back on the counter exactly where I found it. When she got home that night, I asked, not aggressively, not confrontationally, just, hey, what was going on with that hotel charge from last night? She didn't miss a beat. Oh, that? Total mess. The team had to meet with the external UX crew, and by the time we wrapped, it was close to 2 a.m. No trains were running from downtown, and Uber prices were insane, so I split a room with Melissa and Priya. We just crashed for a few hours. Showered. Headed back to work. She even added a sarcastic flourish. So glamorous, right? I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to just nod and move on. Instead, I asked, what about the Uber? It was from your office. She didn't flinch. Yeah, we went back to get our bags. Long night. I didn't want to carry all that stuff downtown. Why? No reason, I said. Just wondering. She smiled and pivoted hard, started talking about the contractor pushing back the prototype and how one of their junior designers almost deleted the shared drive folder with the brand kit. I nodded, half listening. She was steering the conversation like someone who'd rehearsed every turn. That's when I realized something. She hadn't been surprised I asked. Not even a little. She expected me to notice. And she was ready for it. The next few days were weird. Not in an overt way. Just off. Her phone started living face down on every surface. It had a new lock screen, No more preview bubbles when messages came in, just a generic notification. And she was quieter. Not guilty quiet, more like distracted. Like her brain was juggling 3 conversations at once and I only ever got the scraps. I wanted to bring it up again. I wanted to say, "Hey, that guy's hand on your waist. Who was that?" But I didn't, because that would make it real. And at that point, I wasn't sure if I was ready for real yet. Instead, I kept a mental checklist. Nothing aggressive, just observations. The following Thursday, she said she had a spa night with her friend Marissa. She came home relaxed, face glowing, eyes clear. But when she hugged me, her coat smelled off, like a cologne I didn't recognize. Too musky, too strong. Not hers, definitely not mine. I didn't say anything. I just hugged her tighter and breathed it in, like maybe the truth was buried somewhere in that scent. The following week, she mentioned she had an off-site brainstorm with her team. We're renting one of those WeWork-type lofts downtown. Ryan's organizing it, so it'll be a mess. I laughed and said, "Oh, Ryan, is he still pulling all-nighters with espresso and spreadsheets?" She hesitated, just for a split second, then smiled. "Yeah, still the same. You know Ryan." Except she hadn't mentioned Ryan in weeks, maybe even months. And for a while, his name had come up constantly, like he was her work shadow, her funny office twin, her stress buddy. But now, silence. I Googled him, just once. His LinkedIn still said he worked at the agency, still in New York, still alive and well. But in her world, he'd vanished. That's when the seed of doubt became something bigger. Not a theory, not even a hunch. Pattern. She was building a new life, a parallel timeline where I was a ghost. And every time I reached out, she threw me scraps of the old one to keep me from noticing. But I was noticing, piece by piece. They say once you start noticing, you can't unsee it. That's exactly how it was for me after the hotel incident. Something cracked open that morning. Maybe trust, maybe just denial. And ever since then, every detail started ringing louder, like static I couldn't tune out. It wasn't that I became suspicious all at once. It was slower, more corrosive than that. Death by details. First, it was her phone. I didn't notice the change immediately, but one day while we were out for lunch, I watched her angle it on the table, screen down, angled slightly toward her thigh like she was shielding it. The new lock screen required Face ID, and notifications no longer lit up the screen. That was new. She used to leave her phone all over the place, like she had nothing to hide. I told myself it was a work thing. Security protocols. They'd had a breach a few months ago. Maybe they made them all tighten their settings. That's what I told myself. But then came the spa night. It was the second Thursday of the month. I remember that because we usually did date night, something small, nothing fancy. Cheap tacos, a museum after-hours exhibit, splitting a milkshake on the walk back. But that week she told me Marissa had booked them both a last-minute spa night at a place in Tribeca. "We barely see each other anymore," she said, already halfway out the door. "Girl time, you know?" Sure. I knew. She came home just after midnight, face flushed, skin glowing like she'd bathed in lavender oil and expensive silence. But when I hugged her, her coat smelled wrong again. Not her scent. Not her shampoo. Something masculine, sharp, expensive, like a fragrance sampled at the counter of Saks, the kind sprayed deliberately onto wrists that don't wear wedding bands. She brushed past me, kicking off her shoes and launching into a story about Marissa's ex and how he apparently showed up at the spa once. Drunk, banging on the front desk. She told it with such detail I almost believed her. But that's the thing, people who lie for a living tend to overcompensate. I pretended to laugh. I even kissed her on the temple and said, "Glad you got to unwind." But my mind was already unwinding its own thread. The next day, I checked the calendar on our shared app. There was no spa night, just a vague all-day client prep marked on hers. No location, no notes. It used to be filled with things like, "Coffee with Jess," "Remind her about plant store," or "Early train, don't forget proposal." Now, just silence or abbreviations. Blank placeholders. I tried brushing it off. People grow apart from routines. Work takes over. That's what being an adult is, right? But something else started gnawing at me, Ryan. It's funny how names can echo. For months, Ryan had been her favorite character in the sitcom of her office life. You wouldn't believe what Ryan said today, she'd say, launching into a story about him flubbing a pitch or roasting their creative director during a Zoom meeting. I never met him, but I felt like I knew him. Like he was the quirky office brother, the harmless work buddy. But then he was gone. Just gone. No mentions. No recaps. It wasn't like they fell out. It was like he never existed. So one night I asked, casually, we were watching some old thriller on Netflix, and I paused it during a dull scene. Hey, whatever happened to Ryan? You haven't mentioned him in a while. She looked up from her wine, blank for half a second too long. Oh, he switched teams. He's in client success now. Barely see him anymore. Weird, right? She sipped her wine and hit play like nothing happened. But something had happened. That pause wasn't nothing. That pause was something. A week later I got my answer, not in words but in absence. We had tickets to her agency's fall reception. It was a partner's welcome kind of thing. She'd RSVP'd for both of us weeks ago, and I had even rented a jacket because mine had a rip in the lining. That Friday, I checked the shared Google Doc she always left open on her laptop. They used it to coordinate table placements and team clusters. It was all color-coded and hyperlinked, like a living map of corporate diplomacy. I scrolled through it, looking for my name. When I found it, it was crossed out in red. A line straight through it, as if I'd been canceled by a classroom teacher. 2 lines below, next to Kelly's name, was Ryan's. Not just near, next to. Same table. Same cluster. Confirmed. Finalized. I closed the document and sat back, heart pounding in my throat. No warning. No update. No conversation. That night, she told me not to wait up. Said she might crash at a coworker's if it ran late. You know how these agency events get, she said. People start karaoke at midnight, and it's all downhill from there. I told her to have fun. I even smiled. I didn't ask why my name had been erased. I didn't say I'd seen the doc. I let her think I was still in the dark. But I didn't stay home. I took the train downtown, got there an hour before the event officially started, and slipped into the lobby like a ghost. Nobody noticed me. Everyone was too busy checking badges, smoothing dresses, updating seating charts. I stood by the elevators. When the doors opened around 6:50 p.m., she stepped out. Kelly. And Ryan. He was holding her blazer like a chauffeur. His hand was on her elbow, adjusting her bracelet, which shimmered under the lobby light. Her lips were freshly painted, and there was a smudge of her foundation on the shoulder of his lapel. I didn't move. I didn't blink. They didn't see me. Or maybe they did and just didn't care. They walked past reception, laughing softly. She touched his arm as they passed a security guard. That touch wasn't work-related. It wasn't friendly. It was familiar. I left without saying a word. On the train ride home, my ears were ringing. Not with rage. Not yet. Just that strange, high-pitched frequency that sits between heartbreak and confirmation. The kind of sound your body makes when it wants to scream but you won't let it. I sat in the dark that night, not moving for a long time. Not crying. Not yelling. Just staring at a spot on the wall like I could burn a hole through it. Because that's what betrayal does to you. It doesn't shout. It whispers. The night of the reception changed everything. Before that, I was still living in the space between suspicion and denial, a twilight zone where doubt was a whisper and reality was whatever story I let myself believe. But after what I saw in that lobby, her laugh, his hand on her bracelet, the foundation on his lapel, something inside me went cold. Not explosive, not broken, just cold. A kind of stillness that only comes when you've finally seen what you were afraid to see. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the wine glass she'd used the day before, still sitting on the counter. Lipstick rim. Half a swirl of Merlot dried along the edge. I must have stared at that glass for over an hour, as if I could rewind her fingerprints and play the night backward to when she was still mine. The next morning, she came home around 9:15 a.m. I heard the key turn. The door creaked open. She walked in softly, probably assuming I was still asleep. She was wearing a different coat than the one she'd left in. A longer one. One I didn't recognize. Her heels were in her hand, and her hair was up in a bun that hadn't been there yesterday. "Oh," she said when she saw me at the table. "You're up." "Yeah," I said flat. "Didn't sleep much." "Too much wine," she offered, heading toward the fridge. I watched her open the door, pretending not to notice the smudge of something beige on her neck. Either makeup or the kind of skin contact that makes a woman freshen up before walking through the front door. "I'm gonna shower," she said, grabbing a bottle of water. "I feel gross." "You looked nice," I said. She turned. "At the event?" "Yeah. In the lobby. Around 6:50 p.m. She froze, just for a second. But a second is all you need when you're watching someone who's been living two lives. "Were you there?" she asked, voice carefully neutral. "I was." She swallowed. "You should have said hi." I didn't want to interrupt. She nodded slowly, choosing her next words like they were landmines. "It wasn't what it looked like." I didn't respond. She tried again. "Ryan was helping me with my bracelet. The clasp broke. And it was freezing, so I gave him my coat. That's probably why it looked." "You weren't wearing a bracelet when you left." Silence. That was it. That was the last excuse I was willing to absorb. I stood up, walked past her, and went straight to the bedroom. Packed a bag. Nothing dramatic. Just the essentials. 2 days' worth of clothes, my laptop, my chargers, and the folder I kept my old documents in. I texted my brother on the way to the train. "Me, you still got the pullout in your office?" "Jake, always. You okay?" "Me, just need 24 hours of quiet." "Jake, come over." When I got to Jersey City, Jake didn't ask any questions. Just handed me a beer and pointed to the spare key on the counter. We talked about baseball, his kid's preschool teacher drama, anything but what I needed to say. He didn't push. That's the thing about brothers. Sometimes they know that silence is the safest kind of help. That night, I lay on the pullout listening to the distant hum of traffic outside his window, and for the first time since all this started, I didn't feel panicked. I didn't feel desperate. I felt clear. Not clean, but clear. Because here's the thing. The real betrayal wasn't in the hotel or the Uber receipt or the foundation stain. It wasn't even Ryan's hand on her waist. It was the fact that when I saw my name crossed out in that seating chart, I realized I had already been erased from her world. The reception just confirmed what her actions had been shouting for weeks. I went back to the apartment the next evening to grab a few more things. My hard drive, some tax forms, an old photo album I didn't want to lose in the shuffle. Kelly wasn't home. I don't know what pulled me to her computer. I wasn't intending to snoop. But the laptop was open on the dining table, a half-finished email glowing on the screen. She'd left it there mid-sentence, as if she'd been called away. The subject line read, "Can't fake it anymore." It was addressed to R. I clicked it. I know I shouldn't have, but I did. It read, "I can't keep doing this. Every time we're at an event, and I look over and see you instead of him, I feel like I'm finally breathing again. He's not a bad person, but it's been dead for a long time. I kept hoping routine would turn into something real again, but it hasn't. I want to stop hiding. I want to stop pretending. You're the one who belongs next to me at these things. You always have been. Let's talk soon." I stood there, barely breathing. It was like finding a funeral program for a relationship you thought was still alive. The confirmation didn't end there. A few days later, her agency put out a newsletter, internal only, but she always forwarded me the ones with photo sets from company events. This time, she didn't. So I went to the public version on their site. There were 6 photos. The 5th one hit me like a brick. It was a behind-the-scenes hallway *T, probably snapped by a social media intern while everyone was laughing between speeches. Kelly and Ryan stood close, too close, in a poorly lit service corridor. She was smiling up at him. In her hand, barely visible, was a badge lanyard with his name on it. She wasn't wearing her own, and he wasn't wearing his. She had it. I zoomed in just to be sure. The lanyard read, Ryan M. Creative strategy. Not even trying to hide anymore. After that, I stopped checking her emails. I didn't need more. I already had the whole picture. The hotel. The Uber. The live photo. The spa night cologne. The name crossed out. The open letter to him. The badge in her hand. It was all there. Every breadcrumb. Every signal. The timeline wasn't murky anymore. The dots connected too easily. It was undeniable now. And the worst part? She didn't even deny it. Not really. She just stopped pretending I was supposed to be in the room. That's the thing about endings. They don't always come with slamming doors or screaming matches. Sometimes they come in quiet scenes. A canceled dinner, a different coat, a badge in someone else's hand. Sometimes the person you love just stops choosing you, and you finally stop asking them to. The day after the newsletter came out, I didn't go to work. I called in and said I had food poisoning, which wasn't a total lie. Something was rotting in me, and it wasn't going away. I couldn't bring myself to sit in a meeting and pretend like I cared about metrics or Q4 targets while my marriage sat in smoldering pieces across 2 boroughs. Instead, I packed a small suitcase, turned off notifications, and boarded a PATH train back to Jersey City. Jake didn't ask this time. When I showed up at his place, he just opened the door, looked me in the eye, and gave me a nod. That's all I needed. I spent the next 24 hours in silence. No music, no calls, no Netflix to numb the edge. I sat on the futon with a cheap throw blanket and just let the quiet press in. It was heavy, oppressive, but it didn't crush me. Not the way I expected. Instead of the rage I had been bracing for, something colder came. Something still and sharp, like winter light through a dirty window. It wasn't sadness anymore. Not confusion. Not even grief. It was clarity. The kind you get when you finally stop fighting the current and let yourself drift into the truth. Because here's what I realized. Sitting there in my brother's apartment, watching the skyline blur through the smudged glass. The choice had been made. Not in the elevator. Not at the hotel. Not in the hallway with the badge lanyard. No, the choice had been made long before all of that. It had been made in every small moment when she could have turned toward me and didn't. When she made plans and didn't invite me. When she started laughing at her phone and hiding the screen. When she switched the lock code and pretended not to notice me noticing. The betrayal wasn't one big explosion, it was erosion. Quiet, daily, efficient. She'd already left our marriage emotionally. She just hadn't packed a bag. And me? I had been playing the part. Husband as set dressing. Background character in her new story. There was no big argument. No dramatic breakup. Just a slow receding. Like the tide pulling back without fanfare. Revealing the bones of everything we used to be. That night, I took a walk through the neighborhood. The air was cool, and the sidewalks were mostly empty. I passed brownstones with lights in the windows. Families eating dinner, couples watching TV, kids doing homework on kitchen counters. Little pockets of normal, or maybe just illusion. I wondered how many people were living a version of what I had just crawled out of. How many were pretending, smiling for the camera, crossing each other's names out quietly. Back at Jake's, I made a decision. No more waiting. No more watching the story unfold as a side character. I was done letting someone else dictate the pace of my own life. The next morning, I sent an email to our lawyer. We had used him once before, a referral from her father when we bought our condo. He was professional, discreet, and not prone to small talk. I didn't tell him everything, just what he needed to know. Subject, personal filing. Body, need to start a formal separation process. We'll explain details in person. Can we meet this week? He replied within an hour. Wednesday, 10:30 a.m. Bring ID and paperwork. Simple, efficient, like I hoped the rest of this would be. After that, I took the ferry back into the city. There was something poetic about crossing the river that day, leaving behind the version of myself who waited, who watched, who wondered. When I got back to our apartment, Kelly was there, sitting on the couch, laptop open, phone next to her, a half-eaten salad wilting on the coffee table. She looked up when I walked in and smiled, like nothing was wrong. like we were just picking up a conversation from a few days ago. "Hey," she said, her voice light. "You've been MIA." "Yeah," I replied. "Took some time." "Everything okay?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. I just looked at her. She blinked. The smile faltered for a split second. Then, "You're mad. Is this about the reception?" "Because I know how that looked." "But," I held up my hand. "Kelly, don't. Just don't." The silence stretched between us. For once, she didn't fill it with noise. "I'm going to stay here a few more nights," I said. "Then I'll get the rest of my stuff." She didn't argue, didn't ask where I'd been, didn't explain. She just nodded, like she'd been preparing for this scene the same way I had. That night, I lay in our bed my side and stared at the ceiling. She didn't come in. I think she slept on the couch. Or maybe she stayed up scrolling until her eyes burned. I didn't care. It was like we were already in separate houses, just with thinner walls. And you know what the strangest part was? I wasn't angry. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want to cry. I didn't even want answers anymore. The questions had expired. They no longer mattered. The only thing I needed to do now was leave. Because staying wasn't noble. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't love. It was inertia, and I had finally run out of excuses to stand still. The next morning, I made coffee. She was already gone, early meeting probably. Or maybe she just didn't want to be in the same room. Fine. I sat at the kitchen table, the same place where we'd had 100 breakfasts, celebrated little wins, argued about who forgot to pay the gas bill. Same table. Different story now. I opened a notebook, wrote down a list. Change address with HR. Remove access to joint accounts. Secure personal passwords. Backup photos, only mine. Call moving company. Apartment listings, Austin? Austin. I don't know why that city came to mind. Maybe because we'd once talked about going there for a long weekend but never did. Maybe because it sounded far enough away to be new but not far enough to be running. Maybe because it was mine. That night, I walked through the apartment and took inventory. What was worth keeping? What was just noise? What memories felt like anchors and which ones still floated? There weren't many things I needed. A few shirts, my books, couple of tools. The dog bed, we never had a dog, but I bought it 2 years ago because she said, one day. She forgot. I didn't. I left the dog bed. By the end of the week, I'd arranged the basics. Apartment tour scheduled. Lawyer appointment confirmed. Mail redirected. The wheels were turning, and I wasn't stopping them this time. Kelly didn't fight it. She didn't chase or beg or rage. And honestly, that hurt more than if she had. Because it meant she'd already let me go, too. Maybe weeks ago. Maybe longer. But now we were both just waiting for the paperwork to catch up to reality. When people think of endings, they picture shouting, slammed doors, thrown dishes, maybe a dramatic confession. That's not what I got. There was no tearful confrontation, no speech, just a slow unspooling of moments, each one quieter than the last, until the thread finally snapped. I thought I had already seen the worst of it. The hotel receipt, the lanyard in her hand, the look on her face when I told her I'd be moving out. But there was still one more thing. The last weight on the scale. The letter. It wasn't even meant for me. I had gone back to the apartment the following Sunday to pick up a few more things. My winter jacket, a pair of boots, some old notebooks from the hall closet. Kelly was out. At yoga, according to the shared calendar, though I'd stopped checking it for accuracy. It could have said meditation, therapy, or brunch with Marissa. The only thing I was sure of now was that none of those things included me. The apartment was quiet. I moved from room to room, careful not to linger. I didn't want to turn it into a nostalgia tour. I told myself I was there for efficiency. I had just zipped up my overnight bag when I noticed her laptop glowing softly on the kitchen counter. Open, unattended, a half-written email draft pulled up on the screen. I wasn't looking for anything, truly I wasn't. But my eyes landed on the subject line before I could look away. Subject: can't keep faking it. That was enough to stop me. I stood there, frozen, one hand still on the zipper of my bag. The cursor blinked in the message box like it was daring me to read it. I told myself I wouldn't. I told myself I didn't care anymore. But that was a lie. Of course I read it. It wasn't long. Just a paragraph and a half. I thought I could keep pretending. I really did. I thought I could juggle the image, the routine, the version of myself that people expect. But I'm so tired. You make me feel seen in a way I haven't felt in years. It's not about him anymore. It's not even about guilt. It's about choosing what feels real. I don't know what this looks like yet, or what we become, but I do know one thing. I'm done lying to myself. I want to be where I feel most alive. Okay. I stepped away from the counter like I'd been slapped. My palms were suddenly sweating, heart hammering against my ribs. The cold clarity I had earned in the days prior, that still, detached resolve, melted just a little. Because this wasn't just some note scribbled in frustration. This wasn't venting to a friend or complaining to a journal. This was a goodbye to me dressed as a hello to someone else. And the worst part? It wasn't even sent yet. It was sitting there, unsent, as if she was still polishing the language. Still trying to find the most delicate way to say, you were the placeholder. He's the person. I closed the laptop. I didn't delete it. Didn't forward it to myself. Didn't leave a note. Just closed it and walked to the window. Outside, the street was full of life. People walking dogs, a couple arguing over brunch plans, a kid with a scooter zigzagging between parked cars. The world didn't care what was ending in that apartment. It just kept spinning. I picked up my bag, ready to leave. But something made me stop by the desk near the hallway. She kept printed copies of internal company newsletters there, the kind with team highlights and behind-the-scenes photos from events. I don't know why she still printed them, probably for the aesthetic, but a few were stacked neatly next to her notebooks. I flipped through one. It was the latest edition. On the third page, there was a collage of candids from their corporate reception. In one, Ryan and Kelly stood close, too close, in a hallway just outside the event room. The lighting was dim, but you could still make out the shape of her smile and the way his body angled toward hers. But it wasn't the pose that caught me. It was what she was holding. In her hand, half tucked under her clutch, was Ryan's company lanyard. Not hers. His. The name tag was visible just enough to read. Ryan Matthews, Creative Strategy. I didn't even need to zoom in. I knew what I was seeing. He wasn't wearing it. She was holding it, claiming it. That did something to me. More than the email. More than the hotel receipt. Because the lanyard was subtle. Intentional. That wasn't a moment she expected to be photographed. That was something she didn't even know was being seen. Told a bigger story. At public events, the one who belongs at your side holds your badge when you step away. They're trusted with your identity, even symbolically. They're the person who gets to wear your name when you're not in the room. She had been holding his for a while now. I just hadn't seen it. I left the apartment without a word. Didn't text her. Didn't leave a passive-aggressive note on the fridge. Just walked out the door and didn't look back. In the days that followed, she didn't reach out. Not about the letter, not about the newsletter, not even about the fact that half my things were gone. Maybe she noticed. Maybe she didn't. The next time I saw her, we were sitting across from each other at a diner near the attorney's office. She asked to meet before we finalized paperwork. Said she wanted to talk through a few things. She wore a blazer I'd never seen before. Her hair was tied back. She looked polished, controlled, like someone attending a meeting they'd already prepared for. I want to say something, she said after the coffee came. And I don't want you to interrupt. Go ahead. She took a breath. I didn't set out to hurt you. I didn't plan for any of this. But I've been living a life that stopped feeling real a long time ago. And I wanted to feel like myself again. I didn't answer. She continued. You were good to me. Steady. You showed up when it mattered. But eventually, I think I stopped seeing you as part of my future. And I didn't know how to say that without blowing up both of our lives. She looked down into her cup. So I waited. I stalled. I told myself the timing wasn't right, that we'd fix things eventually. But the truth is, I stopped choosing you, and I kept waiting for you to stop choosing me. She looked up, eyes glassy but not crying. I'm sorry for that. I sat with it, let the words hang in the air between us. Then I said, I know about the letter. Her face didn't change. And the badge. She looked away. I'm not angry, I said. I just wish you'd told the truth sooner. So do I, she whispered. We didn't talk much after that. Signed what we needed to sign. Went our separate ways. Back at Jake's, I laid everything out on the futon. My new lease agreement, the finalized filing, my forwarding address. I stared at the stack of paper, each one a step away from the person I used to be. And I thought about that unsent draft, the one where she told him she wanted to feel alive again. Stuck with me, not because of the betrayal, because of the honesty. She had chosen what felt real. Now it was my turn to do the same. I sent Kelly the divorce papers by courier. She called it a misstep, said she needed time. But the same patterns continued: late nights, vague alibis. It wasn't Ryan anymore. It was the choices she made over and over. She wasn't just with someone else. She had stopped choosing me long before. That's what hurt most. Not the affair, but the abandonment disguised as routine. I left without a scene. Moved to Austin. Changed my number. Cleared the traces of our shared life. No more waiting, no more hoping. In the silence that followed, I found peace. Not revenge, not closure, just absence. The moment she crossed my name off that guest list became my own full stop. I let go of the version of myself who stayed waiting to be chosen. He deserved better.